Hi, Secretary Clinton, will you release a transcript of your paid speeches to Goldman Sachs? No, there's a lot of controversy over their speeches.
Why do you think one of these big banks paid you over $200,000 for a speech?
Well, look, I gave speeches to a wide array of groups, from healthcare groups to auto dealers and many, many more. And I think what they were interested in, because what we talked about was the world.
You don't think they expect anything in return?
Absolutely not.
One of the things that Senator Sanders points to and a lot of your critics point to is you made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered.
And she asked whether you would release the transcripts of your Goldman Sachs speeches, and then added, don't you think the voting public has a right to know what was said? But let's make that bigger. Are you willing to release the transcripts of all your paid speeches? We do know through reporting that there were transcription services for all of those paid speeches. In full disclosure, would you release all of them?
I will look into it. I don't know the status, but I will certainly look into it. But I can only repeat what is the fact, that I spoke to a lot of different groups with a lot of different constituents.
Speaking of speeches, you said you would look into releasing these transcripts for your paid speeches. Why not just put them out there and put this line of attack to bed once and for all?
You know what? We will look into it. I said that. But let's get to what's really going on here. There has been a campaign of insinuation and innuendo by the senator and his supporters that anybody who has ever taken a donation from anybody on Wall Street is suspect. Well, that would include President Obama, who took a lot of donations in 2008, turned around, passed and signed the toughest Wall Street regulations since the 1930s.
The other night you said you'd look into whether or not to release the transcripts of your speeches to financial groups. Have you made up your mind?
Yeah, you know, here's another thing I want to say. Let everybody who's ever given a speech to any private group, under any circumstances, release them. We'll all release them at the same time. You know, I don't mind being the subject in the Republican debates, the subject in the Democratic primary. That kind of goes with the territory. I've been around long enough. But at some point, you know, these rules need to apply to everybody. And there are a bunch of folks, including, you know, my opponent, who's given speeches to groups, and people on the other side who've given speeches to groups. If this is now going to be a new standard, so then it should apply to everybody, and then I'll be happy to look into it further.
As the Democratic presidential candidate who has delivered speeches to the largest U.S. financial institution in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees, why are you hesitant to release transcripts or audio-video recordings of those meetings in order to be transparent with the American people regarding the promises and assurances that you have made to the big banks?
Well, let me say this. I am happy to release anything I have when everybody else does the same, because every other candidate in this race has given speeches to private groups, including Senator Sanders. But let me get to the heart of your question. I was the candidate who went to Wall Street before the crash.
How can we trust that this isn't just more political rhetoric? Please just release those transcripts so that we know exactly where you stand.
Well, you know where I stand because I've been in public standing there the whole time.
Will you agree to release these transcripts? They have become an issue.
Sure, if everybody does it, and that includes the Republicans, because we know they have made a lot of speeches. But look.
But isn't it more important, perhaps, to be transparent to Democratic voters about what you said to big banks behind closed doors?
Well, I think I have been transparent. I have a record. I'm not coming to this for the first time. People can go back. They can look at what I said and what I did. So let's get everybody out on the same field. I feel like, you know, I don't mind being responsive. I don't mind answering questions. But at some point, I want everybody to have to answer.
I respect that call. Can you assure the American people that you didn't say anything in those speeches that would undermine your promise to be tough on Wall Street and the big banks?
Absolutely. And besides, I'm on the public record.
Let me ask you this. You have said you would release the transcripts of these speeches when all of the other candidates have done. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate in the Democratic race, and he says he's released all of his transcripts because he didn't give any of these paid speeches. What say you?
Well, what I've said before, I will say again. I've heard him say that. And, look, I think what he's trying to imply, and I know his campaign tries to imply this, is undermining or, again, misrepresenting my record when it comes to being tough on Wall Street. I have a record, Chuck.
Well, I can only say this. Let's make sure everybody is already as transparent as I'm sure you pressed Senator Sanders to release his tax returns because, of course, he hasn't.
Secretary, with all due respect, the question is, will you disclose the transcripts of your lunches?
I want to make a broader point because I've already told you what my answer is. When everybody meets the same standard, so will I.
Returns later, but just to put a button on this, you're running now for the Democratic nomination.
Right.
And it is your Democratic opponent and many Democratic voters who want to see those transcripts. It's not about the Republicans at this point.
Let's set the same standard for everybody. When everybody does it, okay, I will do it. But let's set and expect the same standard on tax returns. Everybody does it, and then we move forward.
Even your strong supporter, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand here in New York, says you should release those transcripts. You said you do it when everybody else does. But what is the concern? That releasing those speeches would show you praising Wall Street?
No, I don't have any concerns like that. I'm just concerned about a constantly changing set of standards for everybody else but me.
In the sake of transparency and just being fair, are you going to release your Wall Street transcripts?
Well, that's a good question. It's a very fair question, and let me answer it this way. I have released 33 years of tax returns, and you can go to my website and see 8 years, the last 8 years of my tax returns. That is the standard that has been set for years, and Senator Sanders has said he will meet that standard, and I certainly hope that he will meet that standard. Now there's a new request to release transcripts of speeches that have been given. When everybody agrees to do that, I will as well, because I think it's important we all abide by the same standard. So let's do the tax return standard first, because that's been around for a really long time.
What was in that speech that you wouldn't want to reveal to the people who are voting for you?
Nothing. And,
so why not just put it out there?
Well, because I know that others, including Mr. Trump, have made speeches. And look at where we are. I've put out 33 years of tax returns.
So if he puts out his tax returns, would you put out your transcripts?
No, let's talk about apples and apples.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? This is the student master teacher, Mr. I Stay Woke, Chris Monroe, checking out this Hillary Clinton doing what she does best. Duck, dodge, and swing and a miss. You know you ain't gonna catch her up in anything. She's always lying and trying. I hear people say it all the time. All politicians lie, but none will lie like Hillary Clinton. Check her out. Find out more information on this topic and many others at chrismonroestl.com. Do what it do. And you know what else? I'ma see you before you see me.